For today's meditation, we will read from 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 1 to 14. When David had passed a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of donkeys saddled, bearing 200 loaves of bread, 100 branches of raisins, 100 of summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who faint in the wilderness to drink." And the king said, "And where is your master's son?" Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father.'" Then the king said to Ziba, "Behold, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." And Ziba said, "I pay homage. Let me ever find favor in your sight, my lord the king." When King David came to Bahurim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood." Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head." But the king said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, 'Curse David,' who then shall say, 'Why have you done so?'" And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, "Behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite? Leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing today." So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along on the hillside opposite him, cursed as he went, and threw stones at him and flung dust. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary at the Jordan, and there he refreshed himself. In the passage that we read, we see a striking example of human frailty, but it also illustrates the spiritual strength that God calls us to exhibit. In this passage, we see David, God's chosen king, dealing with betrayal and slander, two forms of evil that can shake even the strongest of hearts. Yet, David's response highlights what it means to live in a way that honors God, even when faced with undeserved curses and unjust accusations. The passage begins with Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, approaching David with provisions. However, Ziba does more than just deliver supplies. He tells David a lie about his master Mephibosheth, saying that Mephibosheth has betrayed David and is hoping to reclaim his grandfather Saul's kingdom. Ziba seeks to manipulate David's vulnerable situation for his own gain. Ziba's behavior is a clear example of disloyalty and slander. Exodus 23:1 warns us, "You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness." Ziba defied this command by maliciously twisting the truth to serve his own interest. His actions remind us of how damaging falsehood can be, especially when one seeks to elevate themselves through deception. David, hearing only one side of the story, hastily makes a judgment, granting Ziba all of Mephibosheth's property. Proverbs 19:2 warns us, it is not good to be without knowledge, and making haste with one's feet is an error. David, in this moment of vulnerability, failed to heed this wisdom. Acting in haste without fully understanding the situation led to an unjust decision. This mistake reminds us of the importance of waiting for all sides of the story before rushing to conclusions, especially in moments of crisis or distress. The narrative then shifts to another figure, Shimei, a relative of King Saul. Shimei harbored deep resentment toward David for replacing Saul's dynasty, and he saw David's moment of weakness as an opportunity to publicly insult and curse him. As David fled from his son Absalom, Shimei hurled stones and vile accusations at him. He falsely accused David of being a man of blood responsible for Saul's downfall. In reality, Shimei's accusations were entirely false. Saul's downfall was not due to David, but to Saul's own disobedience to God. Nonetheless, Shimei took advantage of David's precarious situation to unleash his pent-up bitterness. Proverbs 26:2 tells us, like a sparrow in its flitting, like a swallow in its flying, a curse that is causeless does not delight. Shimei's curses had no real power over David because they were based on lies. What's remarkable about the situation is David's response. Despite the provocation, David did not retaliate against Shimei. When Abishai, one of David's mighty men, offered to kill Shimei for his insolence, David restrained him. This act of mercy reveals David's heart, a heart after God's own, marked by humility and grace. Instead of repaying evil for evil, David entrusted the situation to God, saying, "Perhaps the Lord will look on my affliction and repay me with good for this cursing today." David's response is a perfect example of 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. It says, "Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing." Instead of responding with vengeance, David chose to bless Shimei by sparing his life. In doing so, David not only displayed remarkable composure, but also modeled the behavior that God calls all of his people to adopt. David's actions in this passage also reflect his deep trust in God's sovereignty. He did not see Shimei's curses as a threat, but as a test. He believed that God was in control of the situation and that God could use even these painful experiences for good. This aligns with the teaching that we find in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. "Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good?" David understood that no matter what Shimei or anyone else said about him, God's opinion was the only one that mattered. His confidence rested in his relationship with God, not in his ability to defend his reputation. This perspective allowed David to maintain peace and composure, even when falsely accused and cursed. We too are called to inherit a blessing through our response to adversity. When others wrong us, when lies are spread, or when we face curses that seem unjust, we must remember that these things cannot ultimately harm us if we remain steadfast in doing good. As Romans 12:19 reminds us, "Beloved, never avenge yourself, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.'" Let us trust God to handle the injustice while we continue to walk in righteousness for our ultimate blessing and for His glory. God bless.